Good evening, one and all.
Good evening.
Welcome to our monthly LASO presentation. This is going to be something a little different. What we're doing tonight is our very first show and tell. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, we sent out an email to all the members and asked who has something that you'd like to show us, and we'll put you on screen live, and that's what we're doing tonight. We have, I believe it's 9 people have signed up. You know who you are, and if you don't know who you are, you're probably not on the list. But the way that we're going to do this is everyone's going to have about 5 minutes or so to give a presentation. You don't have to take the full 5 minutes if you don't want to show your item. Please, no questions from the peanut gallery in the interim. What we'll do, if you have questions, go down to the bottom part of your toolbar there, and you can either put a message in the chat. That would probably be the best place to put it. We can take questions at the end from everyone. I don't know if you can see or not. This is actually my phone, but you can't see my screen. Don't worry about it, because that is my timer. That's my 5-minute timer. What I'm going to do is ask everyone to go mute, except for the speaker for that particular part of the presentation. When your 5 minutes is up, I'm going to chime in and just let you know that time is there. You can speak for a little while longer, but not too much longer after that, just so that we kind of stay on track with everyone. So at this point, what I'd like you to do, everyone go mute. That's going to be except me and the very first presenter who is up, Doug Henkel. Where are you? Say hi, Doug. There you are. Okay, you can unmute yourself.
And it's Doug. For Doug.
There we are, Doug. Great. Very good. And what I'm going to do, if technology is working in our favor, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point where I have the presentation. I've got this one and I've got this one. Let's see if I can go to that one. I'm going to share my screen. And just want to confirm, can everyone see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to go from the beginning, go into slideshow. That'll be a big, there we are. That should be a big screen for everybody. I'm going to put myself on mute, and Doug, I'm going to start the stop clock. So take it away when I go to the next slide. Here we go.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Tom for all the presenters. Beautiful PowerPoint slides they made from the random scans that we sent him. I passed this by another first day cover collector, and he thought this slide was beautiful. And so, and secondly, I have been sick most of the day, throwing up and diarrhea. So if I have to leave right away, I have a backup reader for my wife in case get an emergency, but okay. This is an overview of the production of Clarence E. and Eugene C. Laird of Erie, Pennsylvania, although all the types of works that they did. From 1929 to 1937, the team of Clarence E. Laird, father and historian, and Eugene C. Laird, son and cachet designer, created first day cover cachets. The 680 shown is 680 Anthony Wayne Blockhouse double postcard shown is their first cachet, and the 802 shown is one of 16 cachets they produced for the 799 to 802 territorials as their last cachet. Between January 1935 and September 1937, they published 24 issues of a little periodical called Winding Trails Magazine, shown on the far right. Between those at the American Philatelic Research Library in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, and my own collection, 22 of these issues have been found fully scanned and can be seen on my website. The first 16 issues were 6 1/4 by 9 3/8 inches, but the last 8 inches were reduced so they could be mailed in a standard 6 3/4 envelope. Two issues have not been found. The one numbered number 3, March 1935, and number 17, January 1937. So anybody ever sees these, please let me know. The Shenandoah Crash Cache shown is one of about 200 special event caches the Lairds produced for sale and described in detail in Winding Trails. Some of these covers were pictured, none of these covers were pictured in the magazine, neither special events nor first day covers, none of them. Laird first day covers are relatively easy to find, but it is unknown how many of each event cache were sold. Not many have surfaced for sale in the covers in the years I've been looking for them. I have found less than 24 covers that match the magazine's descriptions. Additionally, 7 of the issues had columns and ads for other event caches by Louis C. Wiegand, Weigand, from Brooklyn, New York. He was the founder of the Associated Naval Cover Collectors, ANCC. Cache makers May Wiegand and Michael Sanders were members of the ANCC. None of the names of the other 100 ANCC members are known. Wiegand made over 60 naval caches as well as first day cover caches. I have those scans, but I have not installed them on my website yet. At the bottom of the slide are 10 different souvenir sheets of poster stamps they produced for their hometown Erie, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, and Niagara Falls. The single Lincoln postal stamp shown is from the 11th known sheet. This is a quandary. I have never seen what the rest of the sheet looks like. This is the only stamp from that sheet known, reported. Only the Lincoln sheet has the Laird name on it. The rest are noted as produced by 4 companies the Lairds owned: the American Historical Cover Society, Winding Trails Booster Fund, the Halcyon Press, and Elmwood Stamp Company. So all the rest of these stamps down here have one of those 4 names on them and not Laird, but they're all same design and they're all together. On October 14th, 1937, Clarence passed away. As many territorial first day covers had already been ordered and paid for, Eugene finished the servicing, mailed the covers to customers, and shut down the cache operation. Eugene was found in 1976 to be still living in Erie. Several collectors corresponded with him, and he was even interviewed before he passed away on March 10th, 1980.
Okay, 2 articles about time. That's all right. Go ahead and wrap up.
Just 4 lines. Two articles about Laird caches were published in First Days, the Journal of the American First Day Cover Society, by Allison Cusick and myself. Everything shown on the Laird PowerPoint slide can be viewed in greater detail on my website, the Cache Display Catalog. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions for Doug, please go ahead and just put that into the chat. At this point, Doug, you can go ahead and go mute. Hopefully everyone can hear me at this point, and we're going to go on to presenter number 2, Rob Sternberg. Are you there, Rob?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'll wait for the image to come up. Okay, thanks. So this is the first LASO meeting I've been roped into attending. And I have 2 philatelic collections that evolved from my career as a geophysics professor at Franklin Marshall College. One is on the International Geophysical Year, and the other is on North American earthquakes. So what I'm showing tonight is a snippet of that latter collection. Now, the United States actually doesn't have any postage stamps about earthquakes. The Citizen Stamps Advisory Committee criteria state that negative occurrences and disasters will not be commemorated on U.S. postage stamps. But I do have about 500 items in my collection, stamps from Central America and the Caribbean, lots of postcards, and some covers representing about 35 different earthquakes. All of these I have tabulated on a spreadsheet, which I could share if anyone were interested. And also the images are all scanned and online in a Flickr account. The earthquake that I have most items for is the San Francisco 1906 earthquake. I have about 170 items from that. And for the Loma Prieta 1989 earthquake, which is the subject of tonight's poster, I just have 9 items. So I've got what I'm counting as 2 different items to show. So that earthquake in 1989 occurred on October 17th at 5 p.m. local time. The epicenter was on the San Andreas Fault, not too far from San Francisco. And it had a magnitude of 6.9. It caused 60 deaths and 4,000 injuries. It struck just before the beginning of the 3rd game of the Bay Bridge World Series between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's. Eventually, that was won by Oakland in 4 games. So the cover in the top left, which is sort of my add-on piece to fit the space here, describes or shows an image with the fault and representing damage to Candlestick Park. It uses the Lou Gehrig stamp, which was issued earlier in 1989 to commemorate 50-year anniversary of the dedication of the Baseball Hall of Fame and Gehrig's retirement. And it's got some notations, some text about the earthquake. It's also signed by Roger Craig. So Roger Craig was the manager of the San Francisco Giants that year. And many of you might remember that he was a noted member of the New York Mets pitching staff in the first couple of years of the Mets' existence. He lost 20 games 2 years in a row, and he had a major league record of 18 straight losses during that time. But on the whole, he had a decent major league record. The original single item, though, that I wanted to show was this letter that was written by Joe DiMaggio, and I had the letter of authentication came along with this. The earthquake damaged about 12,000 homes and 2,600 businesses in the area, and Joe's home in the Marina District was one of those. So I can read you the text. This letter is dated January 5th, 1990, so it's less than 3 months after the earthquake. The letter was sent to a journalist, Jim Ogle, who was also a director of Yankee Alumni Affairs. And the letter reads, "Dear Jim, in answer to your letter about Mrs. Lazzari, I have no idea where she is living, as I haven't seen or heard from anybody about her. I will continue to put my feelers out. Should I hear, I will let you know. My house is still being worked on, and can't do any traveling until at least another week or 10 days. In regards to your letter to me asking if I could be interested to proposal," I'm not sure what that text is here, "my answer is no. Regards, Joe." So if I can just have a few more seconds. DiMaggio mentions the wife of Tony Lazzari, who was another Yankee great, also of Italian extraction and a resident of the Bay Area. DiMaggio got a pretty good treatment from his house contractors after the earthquake, so it seemed like he wanted to stay around to be sure the work was done well. The proposal, who knows what that meant, but maybe it was something to do with Yankee Alumni Affairs. DiMaggio was pretty picky about what he attended and how he would be treated if he was attending such events. You might know the song Joltin' Joe DiMaggio, which was a hit in 1941, the year that DiMaggio hit in 56 straight games. And I happened to find out that the singer of that song, Judy Johnson, who sang with the Les Brown Band, to honor that, she will be turning 101 years old 2 weeks from today.
Great. I remember that earthquake and I remember that baseball game and certainly the damage thereafter. So,
Yeah.
wow. Great. All right, Rob. Thank you very much. Jeff Shapiro, are you ready? You can
The
go ahead,
question,
mute
the
yourself,
question,
Jeff.
the
Let
question
me.
is, are you guys ready?
Oh, okay. I'm going to mute myself and take it away.
Okay, hi. My name is Jeff Shapiro, and I have been collecting postal history for longer than I want to admit, but for at least 35 years. So people complain I don't collect the stamps, I collect the covers they're on. As my wife calls it, the dirty old covers. Uh, for 20 years, I collected the 1938 presidential series and did very well exhibiting around the country. But about a year ago, I decided uh, I needed a change and I sold that collection. Uh, but I missed it. I missed the era, uh, which for me was World War II. Uh, I It's before my time. I was born in 1950, but my father and others I knew uh, uh, served in the war, and I wanted to find out as much as I could. Because I'm a retired social service manager, I don't have a lot of money to spend. So what I've chosen, even when I was working with the presidential series or the Prexys, was cheap stamps, frugal, inexpensive stamps, I should say, with lots of stories. And what I replaced the Prexys with was this purple horror called the Win the War stamp. For those of you who know your Scott catalog, it's numbered 905. And this is definitely not a scarce stamp. 3 billion of them were made during the war years. And it was the idea of FDR to help uh, the morale of the people in the country, because when this was issued in July of 1942, the war wasn't going well for the Allies. Uh, so there are a lot of these around. They can be found in dollar boxes, as this particular cover was found, or uh, on auction sites where you'd have to pay thousands to get this. But let me just tell you a little bit about this, because it's a little cover, as I say, with uh, a lot of history. And for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a cover that came from a Japanese American internment camp in Idaho. And FDR, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, was worried, as was a lot of people, that the Japanese next movement was going to be the mainland of the United States. And there was a group of people who said the Japanese living on the West Coast couldn't be trusted. And the president issued an order saying that Japanese on the West Coast had to be moved to special internment camps. And we were talking about 127,000 people. But what we also know is 85% of those people were uh, part of the United States. Uh, they were not aliens. They had citizenship rights, but these people were given, in some cases, 3 days, but in most cases, 1 day to get their property ready, and they were sent to locations where they were going to be sent to internment camps. And there were camps in 9 states. One of them was in Hunt, Idaho. It was hadn't been built yet when FDR decided to move these people, but by September of 42, the camp was open, and it was on land that was unused federal land.
It's
And
just about time.
say again?
That's all right. You can go ahead and wrap on up, Jeff.
Okay. This cover, it's interesting to find covers from these internment camps, but this is special because it's from an internment camp to a resident at the same internment camp. So instead of walking it over, they sent it through the mail. And at this point, there were close to 4,000 people living there. So it was a pretty big city. And by the end, this Mendota camp became the 4th largest city in Idaho.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jeff, you can go mute. Ed Zuckerman, are you there? You can unmute yourself.
Okay.
And I think I've got the right slide on up for you, and take it away.
That is the slide. On the left, you see a 12 Pfennig stamp issued by Nazi Germany during World War II, featuring Adolf Hitler, of course. And during World War II, there were a lot of counterfeit stamps produced, mainly for propaganda purposes. The Russians, the Soviet Union, did a lot of forged British stamps. They would do things like take a very familiar British stamp with a picture of the king wearing his crown, but atop the crown, they would insert a Jewish star. The implication being that the evil international Jewish conspiracy had caused the war and had tricked Britain into fighting the Germans, who should have been their friends. On our side, the OSS, which is the predecessor to the CIA, forged many German stamps. They forged that 12 Pfennig stamp in a way that looked identical. And they also did that version on the right, where they took some liberties with Adolf Hitler's face and with the caption. Deutsches Reich, which is what the caption on the authentic stamp translates as German Reich or German Realm or German Empire. And Fuchs's Reich, depending on which translation app you use, is either ruined empire or fucked up empire. These stamps were used in an operation called Operation Cornflakes, where in an attempt to get propaganda, anti-Nazi propaganda, in the general German population, the OSS devised an elaborate scheme. They compiled a list of actual mail addresses of Germans living in Germany. They also interviewed German postal workers who were among the prisoners of war to learn how stamps were made, how the mail was distributed, and what mail bags looked like. They then had a bunch of women in Italy, I think they were Americans, they might have been Italians, write letters or address envelopes to actual people living in Germany at their actual physical addresses. Thousands of envelopes. Inside these envelopes, they put anti-Nazi propaganda. They addressed them with counterfeit stamps, the one on the left, the one resembling the one on the left. And they also, inside the envelope, they put the the skeletal Hitler stamp along with the propaganda. To get those envelopes delivered to the German civilians they were addressed to, there was no legitimate mail between the West and the Nazis during the war, of course. They bombed German mail trains. They studied the routes. They knew when the Vienna to Berlin train ran with mail on it. One plane would bomb the train, which would destroy the train, and mail bags would be scattered all over the ground around the ruined train. Another plane would drop counterfeit mail bags filled with these letters that have been addressed and prepared by the women in Italy. The mail bags looked identical to the German mail bags. The German civilian postal workers very dutifully, after the train wreck, after the train was bombed, would go around the vicinity picking up all the mail bags they found. These were the actual mail bags that had been on the train and the counterfeit mail bags with the propaganda letters that had been dropped by a succeeding airplane. And then they opened the bags and they delivered the letters. Some tens of thousands of letters containing propaganda were delivered to German civilians. How successful they were, I think after the war, the OSS claimed that they'd interviewed 10,000 Germans after the war, so they were influenced by the propaganda, but it's actually impossible to know. It was an interesting exploit of postage stamps in wartime. It's called Operation Cornflakes because the letters, the postal system in Germany typically delivered the mail in the morning and the mail was read over breakfast, thus Operation Cornflakes. You can buy the counterfeit stamps. Well, the original stamps are very cheap, they're very plentiful, but the counterfeit of the one on the left is available, and as is the one on the right. I forget what I paid for these. It was something, but nothing incredibly expensive. And that's Operation Cornflakes and postage stamps and more.
Great. I remember seeing some photographs of what those bombs looked like as they were loading the mail sacks into them. Absolutely fascinating story. Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, great. All right, I think Paul Booth is next. Are you there, Paul?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Let me go
All
mute
right.
and move to the next slide, and then you can take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. The souvenir sheet that's pictured here is my favorite item, and it was issued by Argentina in 2017. It was the 200th anniversary of the crossing of the Andes, led by General Jose de San Martin. It was a effort to actually liberate Chile, which had first gained their independence in 1810, but by 1814, Spain had regained control of that former colony. So the patriot leaders of Chile, including Bernardo O'Higgins, who's also pictured in the additional painting and the stamp, retreated to Argentina and regrouped with other patriot leaders there, including San Martin. And they formulated a daring plan to cross over the Andes Mountains into Chile. If you know a little bit about South American geography, the Andes basically separates Chile and Argentina. So the plan was to divide up into 6 massive groups, cross the Andes into Argentina and liberate, into Chile and to liberate the country that way instead of attacking from the north, which would be more expected. As I said, as shown on the map there, they separated into 6 different groups, San Martin leading one of them. And, they worked together to formulate this plan and to execute it. And as I said, O'Higgins was one of the main leaders of Chile's struggle for independence. The journey took 3 weeks from January 19th to February 13th, and that is summer in the Southern Hemisphere. But even still, very high altitude, these mountain passes averaged about 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters. So they still had to deal with bad weather. They had to deal with cold. They had to deal with snowpack, harsh winds. And in fact, nearly half of, or sorry, a third of the soldiers died in that, just in making the journey, and also half the horses died as well. And then if that wasn't enough, they had to be ready to fight a battle once they finished their journey. And that they did in a valley called Chacabuco. San Martin's armies met royalist forces there, and they were victorious. And that was the turning point of the struggle for independence for Chile. From there, the independence forces took Santiago, the capital, and eventually forced out all of the Spanish forces. The souvenir sheet reproduces a painting called Paso de los Andes, painted by an Italian painter by the name of Franz von Riel in 1943. The original painting is huge. It is 7.5 feet wide and over 4 feet high, and it currently hangs in a museum in Buenos Aires that is dedicated to San Martin. And as I said, this is my favorite item. It's not something that has a lot of monetary value. I think I might have paid like $10 for it, including shipping. Jose de San Martin was one of the main leaders of the struggle for independence of all of Spanish-speaking South America, primarily Argentina, Chile, Peru, a lot of the southern part of South America. Simón Bolívar is probably better known. His work was primarily the northern part. Several people worked across the different nations of South America to lead their independence from Spain, but San Martin is the one who became my favorite. He was described as somebody who's quiet, who's thoughtful, very intelligent, and somebody who seemed to have the good of South American people at heart rather than his own personal political ambitions. Wasn't one who gave up on an ideal when he faced setbacks or difficult circumstance. All very admirable qualities. And so that is my show and tell item for this time.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
I see it says $53 in the corner of that sheet. That's pretty pricey.
It's a different currency. It's they use the same symbol, but the currency is 1-to-1.
You bet.
Not sure what the exchange rate is, but it's definitely not 1-to-1.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much there, Paul. Dr. Giacomo, are you there?
I am, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Let me move on to the next slide here, and you can take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the opportunity to present. I'll stick to my 5 minutes, Tom, because I think like others, I might go over, but we'll save that for the Q&A. So I want to share with you a new discovery. I chose a postal history topic this evening, even though I could have gone down the stamp pathway. A new discovery of a Loewenberg-style decal used on cover. And what is that? We can talk a little bit later about Loewenberg, this entrepreneur who really obtained the first patents here in the United States to describe really creating a decal. And it was during that period, during the Civil War, at least a little bit after that, where the government was concerned with reuse of postage stamps and went to a number of different efforts to look at different approaches to prevent reuse of postage stamps, which eventually led to grilling of postage stamps, as we're all aware of, in the 1860s and the 1870s, from the pictorials through the banknotes, and then it sort of ceased at that point. But I discovered this cover a number of years ago and spent probably 3.5, 4 years doing the science to be able to scientifically show that this is what we thought it was, that it was a Loewenberg-style decal affixed to a cover that went through the mails. You can see the cover there at the lower right. It has due 6 on it at the upper right. And you see this funny looking reversed 5 square-shaped oddity that when I saw it, I said, something doesn't feel right. I need to obtain this little bugger and go down the pathway. What is that? It is a portion of the American Banknote Company's engraved design found on the reverse of Scott PC1, which is postage currency note. You can see the small image there of the front and the back of that postage note. And it physically matches the process described in Henry Loewenberg's patent 40489, whereby a printed design, the decal, is transferred to the surface. And I think Mike Shirley is unmuted, so I'm hearing background noise, which is interfering with my discussion. So I'm not sure, Tom, if you'd like to stop that. And could you hear me? Should I start again? You tell me what you'd like. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
I'll just keep on kind of going. So I'll go back. It matches the printed design, the decal, which has been transferred to the surface, which is the cover, and it adheres with this gum-like substance. You pull off this little piece of the back of, if we know, decals, and what is left behind is this image. It is not formally, let's say, a postage stamp, but did we move ahead?
No.
Oh, okay. I saw my slide disappear and come back, Tom.
Go right ahead.
Okay, and so what's really significant about this, it is the earliest known Loewenberg decal. It is the only known use on a cover. It has gone through the mails. It was received by a Mrs. A.E. McDonald in Belleville in Mifflin County, Pennsylvania. It was assessed a due 6 because at the time postage was 3 cents. There was no stamp. Upon receipt, the clerk therein, and we know who the postmaster was in this little town of Belleville with 16 people, I think, and a church and a general store, applied the due 6. Use is about 1863, late 63, early 64. And the PF issued a certificate. The first certificate that they issued in working with Larry and the team at the PF said that it really wasn't what they thought it was. And that was years ago. I went back, like I said, and did the science and used, non-destructive technological approaches. I used VSC, that's video spectral comparators. We used fret analysis and X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy to look at the object that is on the cover, to look at the gum itself. We compared it to known Loewenberg decals that were issued that he printed at the time. And there's a little chapter in Scott if you want to look, and I published this and I'll give you the link and you can read about it. But eventually, after 2.5 years of research, what we showed, and you can read it there on the CERD, is that it is genuine. It is the image of the design from the reverse of the postal note. That reverse image on the postal note was designed, engraved, and printed by the American Banknote Company. The front of the postal note was actually designed, engraved, and printed by the National Banknote Company. So the National American Banknote Company at the time, during this joining together of all of these various conglomerations of engravers and printers, actually co-issued that note. And so what we really determined, and I have a lot of the science behind it, as the gum is scientifically matched to actual Loewenberg decals. It was not recognized as valid postage and was charged the 6 cents due. I have a whole second paper that will be published coming out. And again, I thank Mike Lawrence and the Chronicle for publishing this. That does the research on who is Mrs. A.E. McDonald. Loewenberg at the time was shopping his idea of this decal to the various printers, the National Banknote, the American Banknote, and the Continental Banknote. We believe that this was his test to show that it would work through the mail. He put it at the upper left, and it wasn't canceled at the CDS instead of traditionally at the upper right. There are no contents, but the way that the envelope is, if you look around the perimeter, there was thickness to this envelope. We believe there was contents in it. He knew the Mrs. McDonald. He was expecting it with an envelope inside for this to be mailed back to him in DC, where we think it originated, so that he could show folks at the American National and Continental Banknote Company that his patented theory for decals for use on stamps to prevent reuse would work. And so that's my story, Tom. And I know we had a few blips in the middle, but I hope that came across. And of course, I can answer questions when we get to the end. Thanks.
It did. Great. All right. Thank you. We're going to go on to Glenn Minchell now. Glenn, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Let me advance as well, too. I think we're up now.
Kia ora,
Glenn,
everyone.
go ahead and take it away.
Kia ora, everyone. My particular field of interest is New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. And the cover I'm showing here is from Nui Wha'u, which is the northernmost island in the Tongan archipelago. It's a small rim island, a mere dot in the Pacific, sort of equidistant between Fiji and Samoa, and just for a bit more distance, it's 3,000 miles north of Wellington, New Zealand, the capital of New Zealand. How this island came to be famous to philatelists and ocean liner passengers is that it has become known as Tin Can Island because there's no natural anchorage on the island, and so it was very difficult for correspondents to get to and from the island. So in the 1880s, the European overseer of the copra producing industry devised a system of getting mail to and from passing ships in tin cans, so that they'd be dropped from the passing ship, which would hove to briefly, drop the can into the ocean, and swimmers and or canoeists from the island would paddle or swim about a mile and bring the correspondence back to the island. Correspondence from the island to the ship would be put in oil-wrapped skins and taken to the ship and taken aboard by rope. So that's a very abbreviated version of what happened from about 1897. In the late 1920s, the overseer for the Burns Philp Company decided that it would be good to put some ink pad covers on. And so this man's name was Walter Quenzel, and some of the cachets there. During the 1930s, these became many and in various languages, and became famous with passing ocean passenger liners, which would then hove to off the island. People were encouraged to send mail to the island. Quenzel would cachet them, and then when the next passing ship came by, would send them off to be mailed, put back into the mail stream. This happened through the 1930s until 1946, when there was a massive explosion and the island was evacuated. And to make a long story short, tin can mail ceased to exist in 1983 when an airstrip was built on the island. To get to this cover, it appears credible as a commercial cover. One, because the address is written in Quenzel's handwriting to the Burns Philp Company in Nuku'alofa, which is the capital of the Tongan group. So it was going from Nui Wha'u to Nuku'alofa rather than from Nui Wha'u to random ocean passenger liner addresses in America or Germany, for example. If you look on the left-hand side of the label there, you'll see that Quenzel in his handwriting has indicated that this piece of mailing was to go via Samoa. So he knew that the next ship coming by was on its way to Samoa, and that there would be a ship in Samoa that would deliver his letter to Nuku'alofa at some time. If you look at the top of the label on the left, you'll see a little red rectangular box. And that's a handwritten registration label. So that would further indicate that this is a genuine commercial cover. And that about does it. Looking forward to questions. Tin Can Mail, otherwise known, or better known, properly known as Nui Fo'u.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Sir Glenn. I'm going to move on. Now, this is actually something of mine. Let me start my clock here. It's probably the dream of every stamp collector to find literally a diamond in the rough going through material. And this actually happened to me back in 1986 when I was at a stamp show, and I loved going through junk boxes. And literally in front of me was a box that was labeled by the dealer, better junk, $10 a cover. So I start pawing through that group of covers there, and lo and behold, I happen to see this cover. Now it's kind of ratty. It really doesn't say a heck of a lot, except it's got the word Titanic on it. Now, if that doesn't put your blood boiling, so to speak, for a collector, and that I don't know anything that probably could. But I looked at the cover a little closer, and things weren't quite right. I looked at the date of the postmark, which is on there, which is March of 1912. And I remember my history. In fact, I dare say most stamp collectors are probably the best Jeopardy players in the world. And remembered that the Titanic went down the middle or so of April. That was a month beforehand. And also, don't forget our MS Titanic, which is for Royal Mail Steamship Titanic, was really built to carry mail, and all the mail went down with the ship there in the middle of the Atlantic in April. So that didn't make much sense to me too. But I did remember, and at least knew a little bit, that that era, a lot of times mail was actually hand stamped or handwritten with the name of the ship it was supposed to go on. So I said, all right, this is a good deal. I said, I'm going to spend $10, and literally spent right up through now, almost 40 years later, to find out what the history on this particular cover is. And over on the right-hand side, I've literally collaborated with people around the world to put the pieces, so to speak, of this philatelic puzzle together. And I'm just going to go through some of the quick markings that are on here. First off, there was something called a dossier number down here, which we had no idea what that related to. But as it turned out, this particular company sold medications around the world, and they put in publications ads to find people who would sell the snake medicine, so to speak, to various newspapers in the U.S. and overseas. Dossier number refers to a code that this company put in their ads looking for salespeople, so that they can identify what publication they saw that particular ad in. It's kind of an interesting story what the dossier number is there. The postmark up here, this is not a standard French postmark at the time. It's a little unusual because it is a train marking. It is a train route, a very small one to the northwest of Paris, about 20, 30 miles to the northwest there. So this actually was posted on a train. Moving right along, you can't see the back of this particular cover, but there are markings there. There is a French Paris postmark, an overseas mark, which track this marking further. There is a Washington, D.C. receiving mark when this wound up in its destination in Washington, D.C. Other marks which are on here, again, I've already mentioned the Titanic marking, which is on there. There's a purple receiving marking by the Winter Company when they actually got that particular letter and piece of mail. And there's a blue number on here, which we found out that that is a marking that the company put on the mail, again, just to identify the particular piece, and put an identical number on the letter which was inside. Again, these were solicitations by the Winter Company to find salespeople to sell their snake oil and various medications and the rest. I had back a few years after I had found it, I wrote a brief article together for a Titanic publication. It got a bit of press and a bit of play, and that's how I just happened to get people to write to me. I have a cover like this, or I have something like this, or I can help you figure out what some of these markings were. The story goes on quite a bit more beyond that, and what I've wound up doing is kind of put together a website where you can read more about this particular Titanic cover, not only the one I have, but there are some 23 other covers which have been found since I started this search. So you can at least invite you go to that website that you see there and read more about the cover and the other covers which have been found since then. All right, with that, I'm going to go to Bob Thompson. Bob, are you there?
I am.
All right. All right, let me mute myself and take it away.
All right, this is not an area of my expertise, just curiosity. I'm a worldwide collector, and in one album that I bought from an established collector, I ran across a set of stamps from the Honduras, and then also later on when I got into it, Salvador and that. And I was just very curious. If you can see that set of stamps from the album, they're from the 1800s, late 1800s, and they're all mint. And I was going, what in the world? You know, you don't find mint stamps from that period. They're all engraved, they're all pretty, they're all nice. So what was going on? And then when I got into the Scott catalog a little bit, and there was reference to a fellow by the name of Seebeck. And some of you who are worldwide collectors, or for any of you who are Central or Latin American collectors, know this better than I. He was a stamp dealer and printer. He immigrated from Germany in the mid 1870s, and as a way of making a living, he started becoming a stamp dealer. He also got into printing. He sold his stamp business in the mid 1880s and became a partner in the Hamilton Printing Company. And he made an offer to a number of Central and Latin American countries, particularly around the Caribbean. And what he did was offer to print their stamps for free. And then those stamps would have a limited lifetime. Many of them were dated for a particular year, and then the next year he would print new stamps with a new date. And what he did then was replace those. They had to agree to send the stamps back to him in New York, the unused stamps, now postally invalid stamps, but still legitimate postage. And he retained the plates, and he retained the right to reprint any of the outdated stamps for sale to collectors. And he actually got appropriate canceling devices for some of those stamps. Now, he died in 1899, but by the mid to little before then, most of these Latin American countries canceled their operations with him. So I just found it very interesting to see all of these mint stamps, you know, pretty ones. And now you go and go, okay, they're mint. He printed them, so they're probably not postally, for our purposes as collectors, the ones we'd want to collect. Well, what about the cancellations? You can't even go by that. Now, like I said, I'm not an expert on Central America, but Guatemala, Nicaragua, and El Salvador and Honduras being the principal ones. But I found it very interesting that here's a situation where the kind of cancellations, the nature of the printing and so forth are not the characteristics that we could go and use to identify what were the appropriate stamps. Kind of a rascal. And but it was all legitimate, just unethical from a collector's standpoint. Some of you may have run into him. So if you've run into if you're a collector in those areas, you've run into him before. But for me, it was just an interesting bit of a side trip into why I have all these nice looking engraved stamps from a period where you just don't see them.
Very
Questions?
good. Any final comments? Anything else, Bob?
Not for me.
All right. Well, I'm going to, at this point then, stop my share. We should go back to the gallery view I think we have right now. And open it on up. Thank you for everyone putting in your questions and things like that into the chat. I'm going to put myself on mute and turn it over to my colleague who's going to handle the chat questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for leading this and all the work that you did to pretty up all these slides. Great job. I think it was had a lot of fun this evening. Very interesting to see what other people collect and what other people are interested in. So I was scrolling through the chat. Saw a couple. Let's see, a couple of comments about people who lived near the epicenter of the earthquake that hit California in 1989. Let's see what we have. Let's see. A couple of people shared their websites, their spreadsheets that they mentioned. That's in the chat window. So if you're interested in that, be sure you can click on those links and save links to those. Let's see. Brian mentioned that they had a member of his stamp club that grew up in one of the internment camps during World War II and collected covers to and from those camps. Fortunately, the gentleman passed away a few years ago. Let's see. It's another link to some earthquake stamps outside of North America. Postcards. I did have a question for Jeff Shapiro. Do you have any of the letters that were carried in those internment camps?
Yes.
Those internment camp covers.
Yes, most of the covers I've gotten had no letters, but I'd say about 20% did have letters in them. And what it showed was how normal life was under these terrible conditions in the camp. I've got a wedding invitation in one. I've got another sending recipes, that kind of thing. So it's amazing how these people took a bad situation and tried to make it as normal as they could.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, I can't find a chat box.
That's quite all right. What's your question, Don?
So I've heard that the U.S. Post Office used the blue pencil to indicate things were canceled that were going out of the country. Like we just saw on one of these. And there was no additional canceling needed.
I think somebody's can mute
I
your
might be able to
microphone.
comment on that. Perhaps you saw the lines that were crossed, especially like in the Tongan cover, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see marks like that on registered covers, either in blue crayon or red crayon. They did that just to kind of make it stand out and make sure that they kind of recognize this is a registered cover kind of thing. But you'll see that from time to time on registered covers.
All right, thank you.
See, somebody mentioned they went on a cruise and stopped in Chile. It has pictures of San Martin and O'Higgins. There's also a statue of San Martin and a couple of the other South American liberators in Washington, D.C., near the Organization of American States downtown there. And I think there's also a couple of statues in New York City also. See, attended a Broadway show called Allegiance about the internment camp starring George Takei of Star Trek fame. Very moving way that it affected people in different ways.
In fact,
Question, if I remember right, for Jeff Shapiro, what does Bleck-Donaldson post mean? That was the mark on the going vertically on the left-hand edge of the cover.
Since I'm here tonight, I'm supposed to know everything, but no, I have no idea.
Yeah, actually, I think it was Glenn that did the tin can mail presentation. Glenn, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Question was, what does Bleck-Donaldson post mean? That was the marking on the left edge of the cover you showed.
I think that's one of Quensel's foreign language ink pad cachets. And if I'm right, it's probably German.
That's all the questions I see in the chat. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask one of the presenters? I see Anton with a hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Charles what the point of the decals were. What was the significance, the use, the value that it brought to the postal system?
So during the early days of using stamps, post office was always concerned about reuse. And they probably were overly concerned where they shouldn't be, because there was not a lot of reuse of postage stamps of folks washing ink off of stamps and reusing them. Even though a very small percentage did squeak through with some reuse. And we've got examples of that on cover from the 1840s, 50s, and through the 60s. But there was efforts by the Postal Service to engage with a number of different entrepreneurs and others at the various companies that were engraving and printing stamps at the time to come up with various methodologies for this. Peter Schwartz and Yanni Hoffmeyer and a number of others have done a great job in summarizing that in their two recent books that they just published, which I would recommend, looking at a myriad of approaches. And as I think I mentioned, grills ended up being chosen as one methodology that were imprinted, if you will, impressed upon stamps, where you would create small, holes in the paper of the stamp where the ink of the cancel would bleed through that and would make it almost impossible to wash that off and reuse it. But prior to the Postal Service landing on grills as one approach to prevent reuse, they engaged a number of different folks, and Loewenberg was one of them, who was shopping around his idea of using this decal, if you will, on it. A very specific type of onion skin type thin paper, where you would put on the design, you would overlay that with your adhesive, you would then reverse that like a traditional decal on the cover, peel the backing off, and what would be left would be the little bit of ink, right, and the gum. There was no way to wash that off and to reuse it. It wasn't a physical stamp, quote unquote, stuck on the paper. So it was just one of those probably 100+ patents around that period that was sort of put together and crafted and presented in the various modalities. There were a number of essays that were created. And Loewenberg was one of them. He also even ended up doing these on U.S. revenues and pitching that to Butler and Carpenter in the 1860s too. But first he pitched this to the American, the National, and the Continental Banknote Company. And we know of these and the stamps and the heads that he used, and a number of them were the 1861 images, right? The stamps that we know, number 63, 65, the 1 cent, the 5 cent, the 12 cent. And he started there. But there was never any indication that he truly was able to test his methodology of putting a decal like this on a cover and sending it through the mails, and that it would survive. So this is that first indication of any known decal that was used during this period, late 1863, early 64, while he was pitching the banknote companies, that his methodology would work, that we have found, showing that it could go through the mails. And like I said, I think this definitely came back. And the fact that he utilized an American banknote company, right, engraving that was on the back of the postage currency that was out at the time, shows that he was talking to them. He had access to their die. They allowed him to use that and use this printing methodology of his to create probably a little mini sheet and show that it went through the mail and came back. So I hope that answers the question, Anton, of this little unique artifact. And I'll go to what Tom said. I found this in a little Lancaster stamp show here in Pennsylvania in a dollar box. I mean, call them what you want, right? Where you're just flipping through the various counties of boxes. Rob Sternberg knows the story because I talked about this, and he shared his Joe DiMaggio cover not long ago with us at our show, which was great. But yeah, so you never know what you're going to see and find. It looked odd. It didn't seem like anything I had seen before. And I said, for like $5, $6, what, you make the investment. Here we go. Very interesting cover. And here we go. 4 years later, we've shown what we think we've shown. And Jim Lee, and, Yanni Hoffmeyer and Peter Schwartz and the rest of the gang that know more about Loewenbergs than I know. Like I said, we've proven what we believe it is. And somebody read the article because as Tom was kind enough to show, they gave some kind of gold ribbon for that dang thing down in Sarasota. So it's always nice when you can find something new and add to the body of knowledge of the history of postal history. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Charles. That was
Thank
a good explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought I saw somebody put up a literal hand. Somebody else have a question? No? Okay. I will mention that several of us put Plectos and Post in various translate programs, and it came back literally as tin can mail or tin can post, which makes some sense to me. Just a little bit of history that I know. I know the Germans were active in the South Pacific also. I know that Samoa was at one time a German colony, so probably German would be fairly widely known and spoken in that region. So that makes sense to be a German, German language translation on there also. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bob for the closing announcements for a moment. We are going to stay on here, so if somebody else has some final or some other questions or comments for the presenters, feel free. But before people start having to log off, Bob, why don't you go ahead and take care of the announcements for us?
All right. First of all, thank you to everyone for this evening. Anton, I lost my link to the evaluation. Would you please post that, or are you going to send it separately to everyone? You're muted.
Why don't I do this? Because if I try to, I can find it, but if I try to find it now, I'm likely to copy the wrong link and so I will send everybody a link tomorrow. And so please fill it out. It's going to be important for us to get feedback about this particular program. It's a little different. And we wanted to do it. We want to see how it goes, and we'd like to do it again, but we'd like to know your feedback on it. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, the feedback is very important for us on this one. This is an experiment, so we want to see whether you would like to do this again, what kinds of things, how much, and partly we were not sure how much time would be needed for anyone. So this was an experiment, so please give us your feedback. Our next meeting will be on March 18th, and Brian Jones will be talking about the history of scouting stamp collecting merit badge, which is one of the least awarded merit badges, unfortunately. I've tried, for instance, in my case, I've tried to get my grandson offered to help him. No takers. So I expect from some of the smiles, other people have had the same experience. So we'll look forward to that on March 18th. Are there any questions or comments from anyone?
I just want to say nice job. I learned a few things tonight, and I think you ran a very nice session. I'll fill out the form though for you.
All right, well, thank you. Well, we can stay and talk if anyone wishes, but I think at this point, the formal program for this evening is over. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great